Hey, welcome to Luxury in Moderation, where we appreciate the finer things in life without going overboard. If you're new here, my name's Joanne, and every week I upload videos about luxury handbags and other luxury lifestyle products to hopefully give you some really good tips, or if you're just curious about these topics, like I am. So if you like what you hear, click that subscribe button and join me on this luxury journey. Today's topic is going to be Tiffany and LVMH. So if you guys haven't heard, Louis Vuitton's parent company called LVMH is buying Tiffany Co. So I'll give a really brief background to both companies, some news and announcements that I've been seeing about this acquisition, and my thoughts on how I think things will change things for us, the consumers, and for Tiffany Co. So LVMH, or Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, owns a ton of brands. Of course, their most profitable and largest brand is Louis Vuitton, and they also own Veuve Clicquot, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing correctly, but that's why I have my bottle here behind me. They also own Hennessy, as the name implies, and a whole bunch of other spirits and alcohols. And LVMH also owns Dior, they own Fresh, they own Givenchy. I could go on. They're the biggest luxury company in the world, and they own at least 75 brands. Now, they wanted to buy Tiffany, and originally they were going to buy Tiffany at $135 per share, which is a total of $16.2 billion. They wanted to give Tiffany shareholders, the current owners of the company, $16 billion and bring it under the LVMH umbrella. Now, last year, the pandemic did change things. Obviously, retail was affected quite a lot, and Tiffany didn't make as many sales, and LVMH basically didn't want to buy it at that price. They were like, you're not worth that much anymore, honestly. And Tiffany was like, what? And they were suing each other, and finally, they have reached an agreement where LVMH is now going to buy Tiffany for $131 per share and 50 cents. And that would be a total of $15.8 billion. So a difference of $420 million, but still a very huge amount of money. LVMH buying Tiffany for $15.8 billion is still going to be the largest amount of money LVMH has paid for any brand in the past. For example, they bought Bulgari like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and they paid less than that. So it's a huge deal. Tiffany, I'm sure, is very happy that the sale is still going through, because for a company like Tiffany to even agree to sell and being owned by somebody else and giving someone else the reins basically means that they really needed help and they didn't know what else to do. So they needed new leadership. Okay, now a brief history on Tiffany. It was founded in 1837 by Charles Louis Tiffany. It wasn't always like the Tiffany that you see today. I think it was like an antique shop, or like they imported stuff from Europe way back then and they would sell it to the American consumers. And they do tout itself as being the only American luxury brand. Now, I believe that statement. Most of the luxury brands that we talk about today are from Europe. Even outside of France and Italy, there's a bunch of other, German, English, Burberry, for example, luxury brands that we know of. And there is honestly not that much luxury that is homegrown in America. So I was a huge lover of Tiffany in the past. I even got Tiffany glasses, even though I know they don't make them themselves. They just, sold the name so that these glasses companies can use that branding. But in 2016, I was invited to join what they called their Global A-List program, which was basically their way of trying to get in touch with millennials, because they could feel themselves losing to all these new companies coming up and losing the interest of the younger generation, which is now earning money. And they were like, how do we sell to these people now? We don't even know what these customers like. So they would ask a whole bunch of this in the program to give them feedback on, do you like this? Do you not like this? Tell us how we can improve so that we can sell to people your age. Around 2016, 2017, they did try to revamp their stores to be more like welcoming, like not the typical stand behind the counter all like stuffy and intimidating. You know, they tried to be like cool and get like closer to their millennial and now even younger generation customers. And they did renovate a lot of their stores to, you know, do this new like open concept idea of a Tiffany jewelry store. But honestly, I don't think it made any of an impact. Like, even after I've been to their new store concept, and even when they invited me to go to their like test concept, I didn't really feel a difference. It was like, okay, you're displaying the product and I can walk the whole way around it instead of just it being in a counter, but it's still the same product that I'm not super in love with. So I totally get why they feel like they needed to sell. I feel like it's just been so uninspired the last few years. For example, they came out with their new paper flowers collection, and when I went in to, you know, test their concept, the guy was actually explaining to me like, oh yeah, we came up with this paper flowers collection because when we were pinning things on the board and we had like little post-it notes with little sayings on them, and we were like pinning them onto our mood board, you know, that really inspired us and that got us thinking, oh, you know, it's so cute, why don't we just make it into a piece of jewelry? And honestly, I wasn't super impressed by it. I didn't think the designs were super beautiful or appealing to me. And usually when I hear the story behind something, that gets me like more into it and like I understand like the meaning behind it. But that story was also kind of sad to me. So sorry, this is my own opinion. So now let's get into the actual acquisition. After these legal battles where each one tried to like force the other to like buy or like whatever, it's finally been settled. Tiffany & Co. did pull their stock ticker from the stock market. So it's officially nobody can invest in this public company anymore because it's not public. It's now going to be under the umbrella of LVMH. So with that, the leadership of LVMH already, you know, has some ideas of what they want to do with Tiffany & Co. Obviously, they feel like they have the ability to reinvigorate the brand, to make the brand better, to have their items sell better. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bought it. So let's get into some of those ideas on how LVMH is going to change Tiffany & Co. So most of my information comes from an article which I'll leave below so you can take a look at that yourself. But basically, LVMH wants to do an overhaul of the Tiffany & Co. collections lineup. So I've definitely noticed in the past few years that Tiffany has really tried to grow their market in the like sterling silver, lower end, more affordable jewelry area. For example, their hardware line with Lady Gaga, and coming out with their Tiffany Tea collections and their paper hearts collection, like I mentioned. They're all geared towards the younger consumer that has less money, that, you know, can't buy tens of thousands of dollars of diamonds. And that's because they were really trying to gain a following. And LVMH does not really think that's a good strategy. And I agree with them. They want Tiffany to focus more on their gold and precious gems collection. And, you know, in the past, you know, when Breakfast and Tiffany's came out, you know, they had this huge heritage of dealing in these really nice, precious gems and creating these gorgeous diamond, ruby, emerald necklaces. And they still do a little bit of that, but it's really been pulled back from the general public and the public eye. And that's when things start to go south for a luxury brand, when you're just trying to sell the little bits as you can, and then you lose sight of what made this brand a luxury brand in the first place. You know, like you can't be so short-sighted when you're a luxury brand. You really have to have that long-term vision. And, you know, to be luxury jewelry, you really have to actually create pieces that are tens of thousands of dollars, or else no one is going to respect your craftsmanship. You know, like a lot of people could make sterling silver jewelry and just mark it up like Tiffany has been focusing on now. Speaking of sterling silver, LVMH also said they wanted to upmarket their silver bangles. Now, obviously, Tiffany already has a lot of sterling silver bracelets. I'm sure this is what they're referring to. So I don't know if they mean that they just want to price up the same product, which would be crappy, to be honest, right? It's like, I paid 200 for this bangle a year ago, and now just because LVMH is an owner, I have to pay 500. Like, I hope that's not what they're meaning. I'm hoping that when they say they want to bring the silver bangles up market, that they're actually going to come up with a better product, with more inspiring product, with more beautiful product. And then that will be worth the price that they want to sell it at. Now, the article did mention that the current silver jewelry does have 90% margins. So let's just break that down for a second. Their cheapest, like tiniest sterling silver pendant is probably like $150. Now, if that piece of jewelry is already at 90% margins, that means that it took 10% of 150, which is $15. It took $15 to make that tiny little pendant. They're charging you $150 so then they can keep the rest of that money. So just as a knowledge nugget for us consumers, that is the 90% margin that they're talking about. Now, LVMH does not want Tiffany to focus on that silver jewelry area, as I just mentioned. They want Tiffany to make products that are more than $100,000. In the article, it mentions that LVMH wants Tiffany to focus on this very high price point in order to get exclusivity, which is true. Like not every single 16-year-old is going to be able to afford this new very high price point Tiffany item. But like I mentioned in my business of luxury video, just having a high price point is not going to make me believe that this is a luxury product, okay? It has to be worth that. It has to be quality. It has to be inspired. It has to pull at someone's heartstrings in order for them to want to purchase that piece for such a high amount of money. And that is what is really going to get them back to being on track to being a luxury company. And this gets into that whole discussion of, what's true luxury. Like every girl, I'm sure, likes glittery, shiny things. I know I get attracted to any kind of diamond, but in order for me to shell out the money, which is ultimately the goal for a company, like they can't just be a museum and have these pieces on display, right? Like they actually need people to buy these things. How are they really going to get that desire from the customer? I really do hope that LVMH is going to help Tiffany achieve that elevated standing, which they said they can because, they understand that true luxury takes time. They're going to have to get all these smart designers in a room and come up with these designs, and that's not going to happen overnight or even over a couple weeks or a month. And then they have to take time to make those things. So it might be like a loss on LVMH's books for a couple years before, LVMH really turns that Tiffany branding around. But they did say that Tiffany blue box is the biggest branding asset that Tiffany has, which again, I agree with. No one can deny the power of the Tiffany blue box. It's way more iconic than the Cartier red box that their stuff comes in. I don't know why. Tiffany was obviously doing something right in terms of marketing and branding and quality, many, many years ago during the age of, Breakfast at Tiffany's. I love seeing that color. It's a gorgeous color. Even if I don't love the products that come inside of it so much, I cannot deny the power of the Tiffany blue box. So as consumers, we are definitely going to see some changes happening on the front end where we see probably different lines of product. They might discontinue some things that they don't believe are, fitting with the brand, and they're going to come up with other designs that are probably going to be more expensive. So if you are a Tiffany fan, be ready for that. We are going to see that, if not this year, probably not this year, then next year and going forward. So what does this mean internally for Tiffany & Co? Well, the article did say that LVMH was going to be very demanding, and as a previous LVMH employee, I can definitely attest to that. You know, they run a lot of the decisions at headquarters in France, and they just expect the markets to deliver. With this being their first and probably only American luxury company, there will definitely be culture shock. American businesses are run pretty differently than French businesses. I'm sure that there is going to be some communication issues, miscommunication, misinterpretations, the tones of things, and I'm sure it'll be a little chaotic at first. There might be a lot of news about a lot of changes within internally, but LVMH does respect each of their maisons, so each of the houses or the brands that they buy or purchase, because they do know like that brand is special and it got to be a luxury brand in some way. You know, it's not all the same formula. Champagne is marketed differently than Dior is marketed differently than Louis Vuitton. So they're really going to have to understand and dig into the history of Tiffany in order for them to recreate that magic and bring Tiffany back to that higher luxury level, which they think that they can achieve. And finally, LVMH did say that they would like to focus on advertising campaigns, which is in their power to do, right? This is the pro of being a part of a big conglomerate umbrella company, which is that you have a bulk buying power when it comes to negotiating with advertisers. So let's say if LVMH wanted to buy out Times Square and have all of their advertisements on those LED screens there, they could go to those people who own the LED screens and say, hey, I want to buy out all of the screens for the whole first 6 months of the year. And I'm going to advertise LV in January, Dior in February, and Tiffany in March, and then maybe like Rimowa in April. And they would be able to negotiate a better price for that, because they're like, hey, I'm going to do it for 6 months. You're going to be set for 6 months. You don't even have to look for other advertisers to fill up these 6 months. Whereas if Tiffany wanted to just buy up 1 month of advertising, they would get a worse price. And that is why it is so hard for independent companies to compete with large conglomerates. Now, that being a fact, I don't necessarily agree with how that creates a luxury company. Of course, it does give the impression of luxury when you can advertise in such high-profile places. But again, as I mentioned many times, to me, luxury comes in the quality of the product, in falling in love with the product, the materials, the craftsmanship, all of that. And I don't necessarily think that seeing that on a big LED screen is going to help. It actually cheapens it for me a little bit when I see like, oh, a company feels like they have to advertise everywhere in order to be appreciated. But those are just my personal thoughts. Please let me know what you think about this acquisition. What do you expect to see from Tiffany in the future now that they are being owned by a French company? And I would love to hear your thoughts below. If you like this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so I can see you in the next video. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!